I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, today is the last day of a week which was anything but simple, and it will be remembered by one and all for the information hullabaloo which was created by Ukraine and its Western sponsors related to the one-year mark of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. And it would seem that this is what the promise boils down to, the promise made by Mr. Kuleba in January to have a peace summit in New York. So as to analyze what was said by our former Western partners during this week, we could, without exaggeration, convene a whole political science conference, and possibly that this will happen in the future. Well, people will want to cast a retrospective eye on this. And for such a political science conference, we could propose the following title: Yet Another Missed Opportunity to Peacefully Resolve the Ukrainian Crisis. And this would be right, because any expression using the word peace, which are being disingenuously used, including today by high representatives of Ukraine and Western countries, what is meant is actually something completely different. What is meant is a capitulation of Russia and inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia, ideally followed by the disintegration of the country and withdrawing the territories it includes. These two goals of Western interference in Ukrainian affairs were clearly displayed, by the way, almost exactly 9 years ago on the day of the Maidan anti-constitutional coup on the 21st of February 2014. And people didn't hide them from the very beginning. And these are exactly the goals which resulted in the fact that on our borders we have a hostile, nationalistic, Russophobic regime which decided that they would resolve the Ukrainian issue with zeal. Our British colleague yesterday, when she spoke in the General Assembly and she criticized the Belarus submitted amendments to the draft resolution, she stated that the amendments equate the aggressor and the victim. Are you not at all concerned by the fact that your victim is up to its elbows in blood and Nazi tattoos, and the 9-year-old period of elimination of Russian-speaking citizens in Donbass? Do you think it's normal? Why do you think it's normal for Ukraine to send guns and tanks against unarmed civilians in the east and bomb them? Only because those people do not want to give up on their own identity. Because that is exactly what the Kiev regime did in the summer of 2014. And it was then the internal Ukrainian armed conflict erupted. Do you think that we were supposed to resign ourselves to this situation? Please allow me to remind you that its aggression against Yugoslavia was justified by NATO by the campaign of terror and the need for the Kosovars to live in security and enjoy universal human rights and freedoms on an equal basis. This is a quote from a statement made by NATO on the 23rd of April, 1999. So then you and your other colleagues then deny the Russian-speaking Ukrainians of the universal rights and freedoms if you present the Kiev authorities who attack them as a victim. You also are silent about the campaign of terror unleashed against them. For us, it is obvious that Ukraine is not a victim, because if Ukraine did not wage war against the people in Donetsk and Lugansk, as you condoned it, but rather heeded their aspirations, then there would have been no need for our special military operation. And the Crimea probably would have remained within Ukraine, because the people of the Crimea only decided to choose reunification with Russia only after they've heard direct threats from the Kiev authorities. I would like to take opportunity of the fact that we have Ms. Kalana and Ms. Baerbock here at the meeting. And I would like to raise yet one more very inconvenient for our Western colleagues topic, namely the Minsk agreements. We have all heard recently the confessions made by François Hollande, by Angela Merkel, and by Boris Johnson. They said that neither France nor Germany nor the United Kingdom ever viewed the agreements seriously, had no intention to urge the Ukrainian authorities to implement them, and only used the agreement so to bide the time and give Kiev time to prepare for a war with Russia. Now, even if you disregard the dimension side of the issue, and we have no illusion about the moral qualities of our Western colleagues by now, what we have here is that the leaders of these states openly basically stated that they knowingly violated Security Council Resolution 2202, which enshrined the Minsk agreements. But this does not stop the ministers of foreign affairs of these very states from lecturing other member states here in the Council today. Furthermore, a trite cliche we heard during this week, and it appeared a lot earlier, it consists of the fact that if Russia is to end the war will end, and if the Ukraine will stop fighting, there will be no Ukraine. It sounds pretty, but it's absolutely false. Where, when, and from whom did you hear that the goal of our military operation is to destroy Ukraine, to de-Ukrainize Ukraine? We have never stated such a goal. We have always wanted to have right next to us, as was the case before, to have a friendly neighbor who doesn't threaten us, does not discriminate against anyone, and is not trying to resurrect Nazism. Therefore, this slogan of yours, in actual fact, should be as follows. If Russia stops hostilities, the Ukraine will continue discrimination against the Russian-speaking people, those who do not want to live with violence. Its rights and freedom will continue to be violated, and the glorification of Nazi criminals will continue. If Ukraine ends hostilities, it will get the chance to be reborn as a normal, peace-loving state and will save many thousands of lives. And that is why we have stated on many an occasion that we are ready to negotiate about how the goals of our special military operation could be implemented using peaceful means. But of course, any mechanism which are underpinned by other kind of scenarios, we are not prepared to consider. Colleagues, we have stated many times this week that ending hostilities in Ukraine is not something that the collective West is interested in, and only collective West alone. They, as we know for a fact, prevented the Kiev regime from making peace in April last year, and our Western colleagues currently are happy with everything. The Russians and Ukrainians are killing each other, the Western defense companies are getting fabulous profits, and they have a platform for testing new weaponry, and NATO is getting rid of its old weapons and is rearming. But Washington is also weakening its European competitors who are displaying heretofore unseen servility and impotence. And this is something that we talked about at length in this chamber yesterday. And most importantly, the West is rubbing its hands and hoping that it will weaken Russia, will threaten China, and will keep its monopoly position in the world, remain the only so-called blossoming garden, as was stated by Mr. Borrell, on this jungle planet. Then the top golden billion will continue enriching itself at the expense of others, pitting countries against each other, using their natural resources and exploiting its people. And that is what is meant by the rules-based order, which Russia dared infringed upon because we don't want to accept a Russophobic wasp's nest at our borders. We want to make sure that the developing countries have no illusions about what this conflict is really about. And of course, resolving this conflict is inseparable from the issues having to do with just and indivisible system of European and Atlantic security. Currently, it only works for the United States and its NATO allies. They arrogated to themselves the right to interfere in any international issues and internal affairs of other countries. Ukraine is a very good example. Their bases are deployed on our borders in violation of key understandings ending the period of Cold War. Western leaders lied to us then and want to continue deceiving us now. For them, the right of NATO to expand uncontrollably is absolute, and they keep telling us tall tales about how much money they spend for development purposes, as was just done by State Secretary Blinken. Let me just recall here that after the Cold War alone, the United States conducted 251 military operations abroad and inflicting untold damage on those countries. Even if you pay 100 times more than you do now, you will not be able to make up for that damage. The collective West need to understand and accept the fact that there are other players on the planet with their own interests, and you have to coexist with them, or you can even cooperate them in mutual interests. But this has to be done on an equal and respectful basis. A unipolar world is in the past, and it's our mutual interest to make sure that we transition to a multipolar world with as few upheavals as possible. And we would like to hope that the Ukrainian crisis will be the last hot phase of such a transition. This is how a genuine discussion of peace should look like, possibly within the UN. And the sooner we start talking about it like this, the better. We tried to start such a dialogue before the special military operation at the end of 2021, but all our proposals to have such a dialogue was spurned by the West. The price was paid by the Ukrainian people. The Kiev regime sacrificed the Ukrainian people for the purposes of Western geopolitical interests. We welcome genuine efforts to have peace, such as, for example, the Chinese proposal. Though the choices here is up to our former Western partners, first and foremost, Washington. Obviously, after everything we've discovered about you this year, after limitless and disgusting Russophobia and the attempts to cancel Russia, after supplying the Zelensky regime with weapons which were used to kill women, children, and the elderly in Donbass, after your Ukrainian adventure and trying to create difficulties for us on our borders, our relations will never be the same. We do not believe you, and restoring our trust will be very difficult, if at all possible, because what's important here are deeds, not words. But attempting to do this, it's in your interest. At this point, you're just worsening the situation by continuing to pump the Kiev regime with weapons and helping them in the battlefield. And you leave us with no option other than to eliminate threats to Russia from the territory of Ukraine militarily. Please bear this in mind when you start making up new anti-Russian initiatives at the UN and pass them off as evidence of support for Ukraine in the world. I thank you.